This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret phrase is tube sock.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. Today's guest is James L. Sutter. He's the co-creator and of the best-selling Pathfinder and Starfinder tabletop role-playing games. He's the author of a queer young adult romance novels, Darkhearts, and recently, The Ghost of Us. When did Ghost of Us come out?
It came out middle of June, so
Yeah,
that's like a month old.
Yeah, it just came out. As well as fantasy novels, Death's Heretic and The Redemption Engine. His short stories have appeared in Nightmare and the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, the #1 Amazon bestseller Machine of Death, and more. He's also written for comics, video games, and other tabletop games such as Dungeons and Dragons. James lives in Seattle, where he's performed with musical acts ranging from metalcore to musical theater. So welcome, James. Very, very glad to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So all the folks who are watching on YouTube can see these costumes we've gone with, but for the folks who are listening to the podcast, we have to describe them. So tell everybody about this amazing getup.
Oh, well, I mean, we talked about, you mentioned my metalcore experience in there. So I decided to dress as the newest member of the metal band Sleep Token. So anybody who's seen them before knows that they've got incredible costumes. So I've now got that as well. I've got the cool like alien rune half mask and a cloak and this big amazing guitar. So yeah, I'm really feeling it. The gauntlets really complete it.
It's well, and the mask, the mouth on the half mask is so in contrast, I went old school, so I'm dressed as a member of Guar with a lot of foam. I mean, it's a huge amount of foam. It's far more goofy than Sleep Token. Sleep Token is genuinely scary looking, and I look
legit. Their art direction is choice.
Yeah. So for folks who are listening, James looks genuinely scary, and I look like a guy in a foam demon costume. It's very hot. It's going to be really, really warm in this. So I will be sweating through the show. I can't imagine what Guar costumes smell like at this point.
Oh God. I mean, I imagine a Guar show in general. Yeah.
Are they still touring?
I have no idea, but I know that they were going for so long.
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's one of those experiences I would want to have. Like if Guar came through, I'd be like, I probably should see Guar at some point. That would be hilarious.
Right. I never saw them. I did, sort of a similar vibe. I did one time with my old metalcore band Shadow at Morning open up for the band 3 Inches of Blood, which is full-on fantasy metal, if anybody knows that. And that was one of the strangest shows to open up because everybody in the audience was 100% there for 3 Inches of Blood and not for us.
Right.
And they're all like, the audience members were all like wearing armor. Like it was all spikes and helmets and things. And it's like, man, if ever there's an audience that you don't want to like be judging you harshly, it's the ones that are armored up for war.
Yeah,
yes. We won a few of them over like that. That felt good.
Well, and as long as you're able to tell the tale later, you were successful. Like
exactly.
There's a real easy measurement there. You won enough over, and the others didn't impale you.
Yeah, exactly. We survived.
Well, so I have been excited to talk to you. You've got you're composing an audiobook intro music for both of your young adult novels.
I already did. Yeah, if you
so how did that I mean, being able to do both is amazing in and of itself. I do not have the talent to do the music for the audio, but did you do the audiobooks as well, or were you?
No, I didn't record them. I just, I've always loved audiobooks, and I'd always wondered, anytime you listen on audio on Audible or Libro FM or wherever you get them, there's always some degree of intro and outro music.
Yeah.
And I was always like, well, God, somebody has that job of composing those, and wouldn't that be fun? And I've been, like I said, playing music in a lot of different capacities for a long time, and I did record a couple of like an intro theme song and a couple of music beds for fantasy author Brian McClellan's podcast, Page Break. So I did all the music for him, and it was super fun. And so when they were going to make an audiobook, Macmillan Audio was going to do an audiobook of Darkhearts, which is a book about music. It's my queer young adult romance all about falling in love with the boy who stole your chance to become a rock star. And it draws a lot on my life as a teenage musician here in Seattle, where the book's set and where I grew up. And so when it came time for the audiobook to be made, I said, "Hey, how do how do you get that music, and can I apply to be the person?" And they went, "Oh, I mean, that sounds cool. Yeah, go for it." So they
Yeah,
just let me do it. And then same when Penguin Random House made the audiobook for The Ghost of Us, they again said, "Sure, yeah, if you want to do it, go for it." And so I got to write the intro music for both of those.
that's awesome because I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I'm a big audiobook fan, and some of them just use the same canned music. So you're going, oh, they've got intro music, but I've heard this intro music of
Oh,
five
really?
other books. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
that seems like such a waste. Why
yeah.
not? There's so much music out there. It would be so cheap to license it. But
Yeah, but I think they think we've already bought this from one person once, and we're allowed to use it for whatever we want. Why hire somebody new? And it's pretty corny, or at least it was back in the day. Like it was, it's just this little bit of intro elevator music that kind of lets you know, oh, this isn't just a narrator. They got some music somewhere, but it's pretty bad. And
yeah,
so yeah,
no, I definitely wrote it, each piece I wrote specifically for that book. And it doesn't necessarily originally I was thinking like, oh, well, I'll try to write it in the style of like the
yeah,
band from Darkhearts or whatever. There's a little bit of that, but ultimately I just sort of wrote what I thought sounded like a great intro for the vibe of the book. And so both of them ended up being pretty upbeat fun because they're ultimately romantic comedies, both
right.
of these novels. Unlike my fantasy novels in the past, which were much more sort of not grimdark by any means, but they were much more traditional fantasy, very serious. And these are fun. Like they're also heavy in parts, and coming of age books that both deal with death to some degree. But there's also a lot of love and friendship and dick jokes, and
Right.
it's a good
Well,
time.
and rom-com works best that way, where it welcomes somebody in, and then when it gets serious, you're like, I didn't expect to be this emotionally affected by this, but it's later in the
Yeah,
story, it's
exactly.
not early on, we're going to be dealing with death on page 3, like,
Exactly. Well, I mean, like, I had some people wonder because Dark Hearts is a rom-com that starts at a funeral. Like, page one, like, there is a teenager who has died. And, like, I understand that's a rough intro for a fun romantic comedy, but it's just what the story needed. And I actually am really proud of it. I think it works well. So
well, it's
anyway,
it's
I
it's
hope
very
people agree.
different to have, death on page one, well, funeral on page one, which isn't death on page one, it's death
True.
on page -3, but funerals, that's the four weddings and a funeral kind of thing, where funerals are all awkwardness, which is kind of perfect for teenagers. Like right away, they're going, "Oh, feeling uncomfortable and awkward. This is how I feel all the time."
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, like I feel like Dark Arts for me really did start, I had the idea for the book and I just kind of sat down and wrote the first couple chapters. And so the first words that came out for it, or for the first chapter, were on that like first day of writing and really kind of set the tone, like described the book in general for me. I'm not sure, maybe I can do it from memory, but it's just it's hard to know what to say at a friend's funeral. It's even harder to know what to say at an enemy's funeral. So what do you say when it's both?
Yeah,
And
right away, hooked.
that kind of
Yeah.
encapsulates the whole story, right? Because it's
Yep.
a frenemy's story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and well, and that I don't know how to react to this circumstance is
simultaneously quintessentially teenage and totally universal. You know,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
47 years old and I'm like, yep,
exactly.
I get that feeling.
Yeah.
But boy, that was, calcified when I was, whatever, late middle school, early high school of I don't know how to handle this situation. And then it just gets worse later in high school. The characters are what, 16, 17?
Yeah, so I think in Darkhearts they're both 17,
Yeah.
and in Ghost of Us they're both 18.
Yeah, and that feeling of I don't know how to react, but at least I can hide in the fact that what I'm just in seventh grade goes away by, junior year. And now
Yeah.
I think the people around me expect me to know how to handle this, and I don't,
Yeah. Well, so much of both of the books are about sort of insecurity, feeling like you don't know exactly who you are because you didn't end up becoming who you thought you were going to be, which was a feeling that really, grabbed me when I was a kid. And it's so strange because people think like, oh, you're in high school and you have your whole life before you. But like, I remember I started playing in bands when I was like 15. And by the time I was 18, we'd had some success, but I could see younger bands coming up behind us. I could see that, like, well, if I'm 18 and we haven't gotten signed yet, like, maybe I'm a has-been. Like, maybe I'm washed
which is
up.
isn't that wild now to look back and go, I
It
felt like a
is.
has-been at
It,
18 years old.
it is, but I think that there's so many kids who walk
Uh-huh.
around with that feeling of whether it was, you know, the, high school football star or the drama kid or the musician or whoever who thought they were going to make it big. They turn, they get to college and discover that they're actually not, they might have been the best in their school, but they're not world class. And so suddenly they have to find a new identity.
Yeah.
And that was really the heart of Darkhearts, that book, was me wrestling with that question of what happens when you don't become the rock star that you expected to. And even beyond that, like, what does it mean when the labels you use to define yourself to yourself no longer apply? And so, like, it's also a book about coming out, Darkhearts is, and very much parallels sort of my own experience as a bisexual man, sort of figuring that out. And that question of like, okay, well, what if you aren't who you thought you were, even at that level? Like,
Right.
if you are discovering new things about your gender or sexuality or whatever, at the same time that all your dreams are getting revised, it's a very tumultuous time. And so
Yeah.
Darkhearts was trying to capture that feeling.
And is the setting very tolerant school? So it's not dealing with kind of the external I'm not accepted as much as
Yeah,
I am not who I thought I was.
exactly. Yeah, no, both of my books. I mean, Darkhearts, there's a little more of an issue around coming out because the basic pitch for Darkhearts is the main character is in this band. He forms a band with his best friends in middle school. They do all right for themselves. Artistic differences make him storm out, and then the other two get huge without him. So now he's stuck in an ordinary high school life while the other two become pop stars. But then one of them dies, and so he and the lead singer, who he's now, frenemies with, get thrown back into contact. And as they do, he starts to remember why they were so close in the first place, even while he sort of despises this guy, because this guy represents everything that he feels like he should have
Right.
had. But then he starts to realize that, oh, actually, he's also really attracted to this guy. And
Yeah,
like they
maybe
start,
I was close to him for
yeah,
reasons I could not understand at that age.
yeah. And so they start this whole secret relationship. But then, of course, he starts getting the idea of, oh, maybe this is my ticket back into the band, too, which creates a lot of pressure. And then, of course, it does deal with, society's view of sexuality in terms of being a celebrity coming out is very different. Like the main
Right.
character, friends and family are all totally fine with it. But the romance, the love interest, his career is going to be
Right.
shaped by how he's perceived. So that book has some degree of worrying about that. But in general, I try to make it supportive. And then in The Ghost of Us, I really wanted to write a book where, it's a queer romance. The two girls are out and it's totally a non-issue. At no point in the book is it ever uh even really addressed. These kids just, nobody has a problem with them being queer.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to write a story like that because I feel like, you know, coming out stories where kids deal with prejudice, like they're still important and they're still relevant, but we've had a lot of
A lot
that.
of
And
them.
so I think we
Yes.
also need to see queer stories where it's an aspect of their character, same as all their other demographic information, but it doesn't fundamentally drive the story. The story is not about that. Like, this is a romance. It's not like a queer romance because it's all about queerness. It's just
Right.
about the romance.
Yeah, I've seen over the course of my career, I started off, I teach high school English, and
Oh, nice.
in my classroom 20 years ago, I was having to fight the battle every single day of kids using gay as a slur, right? And
Right, right.
I'm in a small community, it was, and I have seen the absolute flip to where now if a kid is coming out and they're dealing with something, it's not in the school. I have a school that
Right.
I mean, the students are like, what? Fine. Like that, they're, but it's some parent, it's some step parent,
Right,
it's
right.
uncle, and so I think telling that story of the kid who's dealing with, a household that is not accepting them is
Right.
still important for that kid. Like there's a kid out there who absolutely needs that story.
Yeah.
But you're right, telling the story of a kid who goes, I'm coming out, and everybody goes, okay, like that's an important story for queer kids to know. Hey, you're in a community that is accepting. That might not be the issue, but it doesn't mean you're not going to wrestle.
Yeah,
And so that
exactly.
part of the story.
I think getting something out there, like, it's, you see sort of the hashtag of like queer joy, and I think that's what it's all about, is just making sure that queer stories aren't purely defined by struggle.
Yes.
Which is also weirdly exclusionary. Like, a thing that I found when I was first coming out, um, you know, 20 years ago, uh, was that I felt really weird about claiming any sort of label as a bi man, because I felt like, well, yeah, I mean, like, I'm a bi guy, but like, I pass, and I've
Right.
never had to, like, I also live in Seattle, so super liberal city. So like, I've never had to fight and suffer for my sexuality. And so claiming, going to the Pride Parade, feeling like saying I am queer felt like stolen valor. It felt
Yeah.
like, I had these gay and trans friends that had really had to scrap and scramble to like survive. And like, I just felt like we are not the
Yeah.
same. I haven't had to do any of that. Like, I don't deserve to be part of this group. Um, and then at some point I realized, like, well, isn't that deeply messed up? The
Yeah.
idea that we have to define queerness by suffering. Like,
Well, and
that's not
worse,
the world we're shooting for.
that queerness has been defined by the oppressors. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
that's not fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think I wrote an essay many years ago now for there's a science fiction magazine called Lightspeed, and they had a Queers Destroy Science Fiction issue that I wrote an essay for called Halfway in the Pool, where I talked about exactly this thing, how I didn't feel comfortable claiming the label for a long time. And so like, here's me essentially giving permission to all you bi folks out there, like, there's a B in LGBTQ, for a reason. Like, you belong, you're here, don't worry about it. And I immediately, the second that essay went live, I got so many letters from people that said, oh my God, I've felt this way, my whole life. Like, I'm too queer for the straight people, but too straight for the queer people. Um, and
Yes.
I hope that kids today don't have that same experience. Like, I can remember going to I remember one conversation in a gay bar when I was in my 20s, where I was, hanging out with my gay friends, and some other gay guys were talking, and they just did not believe that I was bi. They were either they thought that, I must be closeted, or when they determined that wasn't the case, they were like, it's okay to be the straight friend. Like, you don't have to
Oh,
pretend.
they thought, okay.
Yeah, and then I like, it really took a little while of talking. I mean, they were also very drunk, but like, when they actually realized, like, no, here's a legitimate bi guy, it's like they'd found a unicorn. They were
Yeah.
like inviting people over to meet me. And I was like, what a weird experience. But fortunately, it feels like, at least around here, that's really changed. Like, kids these days are
Yeah.
much more cool with sexuality as a spectrum, with gender as a spectrum. Like, I hear about high school students where my friends who are teachers will say, yeah, kids will just like change their pronouns day to day, and
Yep.
everybody just goes, okay, well, what is
Okay.
it today?
Yeah, and they're
and nobody,
figuring it out. They'll go, I'm Demi,
yeah,
and I'm like, the one that I've been really interested to see if it takes off at the high school level as kids are trying to figure out relationships is
right.
polyamory.
Oh
Like,
God, yeah, that's
it's
gonna
gonna get,
have some high
I
school
have not
drama.
had that kind of drama yet in a class where it's like, oh, this kid's, trying to navigate having, a couple of partners. But I'm sure it's coming. Like that's,
Yeah, I mean, I'm
that's
sure it'll be messy, but honestly, all dating in high school seems
right,
messy, so
right. It
it
just
might
adds
not
a
be any
level of
weirder.
complexity that I'm like, there's gonna be drama.
Yeah.
But
And you know what? It's going to be the drama kids doing it first anyway.
oh yes,
So
yes, exactly. Yes, there will
some
be tears and
stereotypes
running out of
continue
the.
to be true, and if you want to find your fellow high school queers, go to the drama
Oh
department.
yeah. Oh, well, and that's been one of the cool things to see is absolutely starts in the drama department
Yeah, yeah.
and then gets to, like the volleyball team, the girls basketball team. Those
Right,
are really
right.
predictable. And then it's the football team and you're
See,
like, okay, we have come to a different place now.
that's so awesome. Like
Yeah.
because I don't have kids and I don't work in high schools. Like I don't have the direct experience, but like I love hearing about that and
Yep.
knowing that that's happening, that you can now have the gay quarterback. Like
Yep.
that's awesome. That's so
Yep.
much progress, and
And
we've
it's
got a
not
long way
even
to
I'm the
go,
gay
but
quarterback. It's just I'm the quarterback, and here's this asterisk, like, oh yeah, and by the
and
way, and
also he's gay.
he's
Yeah.
dating that guy from the theater department. Everybody's like, okay, like
And
it's
that's
not
so
a thing.
good. I'm
Yeah.
so happy
Yeah,
about
it's
that.
the kids are all right. Like when I see our political, adult political world, and it's just so awful. And I'm like, people need to know the kids are fine. The
Yeah,
kids
yeah.
are doing really well. If we don't screw them up with like a Moms for Liberty group swooping
Right.
in and saying you can't possibly talk about your actual lives, the kids are in good shape.
That's so exciting for me that they're getting better. Although I'm also fascinated by, and actually, well, I'll save it. I'll save it. I know it's one of your questions later. So
Yes, yes. Well, I did want to ask you about, so, show about procrastination, what we do when we're not doing our work.
yeah, and
So,
we spent so long getting to the first question. I think that's
hey,
perfectly in keeping
I'm
with the theme.
exactly. I'm
Yeah.
totally fine with that. But I did want to ask, what has been going on in terms of what's been pop culture that's been pulling you away from your work lately?
Oh God, what pop culture has been? So I don't really watch much TV. Um, let's see. I think oh, you know what? I watched a documentary the other day that I really liked, which was called Goodnight Oppie, about the Spirit and Opportunity Mars rovers. And it's just a documentary introducing you to some of the people involved in it and going through that whole long mission.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was beautiful. Like I definitely cried over a robot, like repeatedly, and just about these people and their enthusiasm of doing this thing that's just purely scientific discovery. Like their excitement is just to kind of do something on behalf of humanity. There's no, like, at least the way it's portrayed, like it's not bickering, it's not nationalistic, it's just we are people trying to get to Mars, and holy crap, isn't this fun, and we love our little robot. And so
And
I
have been
absolutely,
remarkably successful. I should check that out. I
yeah.
mean, successful beyond their wildest expectations.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah, no, you should see it. It was fun.
that I love those stories of, just, checking in with Spirit and Opportunity, on Twitter and just being like, they're still going. They're still going,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
seeing the scientists who were so happy that they were still getting images and stuff. So yeah, that one's one I'll absolutely check out. So it's called Goodnight Oppie.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see if I can find a link and post that in the show notes for folks who want to check that out as well. What about in the news? What's been pulling you away from your work?
Oh God. Well, I mean, the honest truth is that it's been politics. It's
Yeah.
been watching the situation develop with, Biden, and the first debate didn't go very well, and like, is he going to drop out and step aside for somebody else, or is he going to keep going? And all options seem really risky
Yeah.
when if we don't win, things are going to be abysmal.
Like full on
Like
nightmare fascist
like
dystopia. Yeah,
Trump winning the first time was bad enough. Trump winning again when all breaks have been removed
exactly.
within the judiciary and the Republican Party, like there's going to be nobody left to tell him no. So like we have to, and I understand people who are dissatisfied with Biden and hope
Yeah.
that he steps aside. Like I would love it if he tapped, somebody else that people were more excited about, that gave us a better chance of winning. But like, one way or another, it cannot be Trump or we are all screwed. So I've spent a lot of time biting my nails about that.
Right. And I, theater kid, I had
Yeah.
this like fantasy of like a big dramatic, like, I am not going to drop out. I'm not going to drop out. I'm not going to drop out. And then at the convention, giving some amazing speech about why Kamala would be, and in
Right,
passing
right.
the torch and convincing all of the delegates and doing it in this really dramatic way. And then everybody's very excited about her and we move forward.
Yeah, I
And
would
I'm
love the Aaron Sorkin version of
right.
reality.
Yes, that's exactly what, I had. And instead it's just devolved into, well, if, I worry that if we got to the place where people were saying, I am afraid that Biden can't win, and therefore I think maybe it should be. And they were kind of hesitant, like,
Right.
maybe. And then other people would go, you are insufficiently loyal, and therefore you're an enemy. And it got like
Right.
really nasty very quickly. And I'm just
Right.
hoping people remember, like, the reason people were anxious is because we've all got the same fear.
Well, and everybody also, it does feel like on the left, people are very angry about Gaza, which is super legit. I am
Yep.
also very angry about
Yes.
Gaza, but I'm not so angry that I'm like want to punish Biden by putting in somebody who would be even worse on Gaza.
Exactly. And
Right. Like,
punish
and so
Palestinians.
like
Like,
I
that's
don't
the
see
thing
any
is,
upside there.
the thing that gets me is the folks who are very angry about Gaza, legitimately, correctly, are angry because of what is happening to the Palestinian people.
Right,
To then
exactly.
put someone in power who's going to be so much worse to the Palestinian people
Right.
belies the concern that you had the
And
first time. So it's like, yes, this is really, really frustrating. And even that is a terrible understatement. It is
yeah,
a
it's an
full-on epic,
atrocity. It's
atrocity.
an
We have war
abomination.
crimes being
And
committed.
now at the same time, I will say, like, there are elements of the Biden administration that I'm so happy with. Like the
Right.
amount of green energy, environmental, like
The
we had the
largest
biggest
investment in the
climate
environment
change. Yeah.
ever,
In
ever by
ever.
anyone ever. It's
So like,
huge.
and that's it. It drives me nuts that, man, this is getting way political. I don't really try to avoid this stuff, but
If I read this quote by Plato that was apathy, something to the effect of apathy to the political sphere is a concession to be ruled by evil men. Like, we
right,
should be able to talk about politics without being
right,
afraid of it. The people who tell us not to talk politics are the people who want to control us. So I am
right.
totally
But I
fine
do
talking politics.
a thing that really worries me about, and I feel like social media has really driven this, and it's not just with this election cycle, it's in general, it's that I feel like we have created on the left a political culture where you're never allowed to celebrate anything.
Yeah,
Like as soon as something good happens, it's you brush over it and go for the next problem. And like that is important to keep, to keep fighting. But I feel like if we never celebrate things, people don't realize how many wins we're actually getting. And then
yeah,
people get really discouraged and feel like we're losing. And I
yeah.
just feel like, right, we got the IRA, like that climate change. We've had a lot of really good wins on the leftist side, or the democratic side, and I feel like we just move on without a peep, and I think that hurts us because it makes everybody
Absolutely.
feel like we're not getting anywhere, and it's like, no, we've actually, like, we got a long ways to go, but we've made progress, and if you don't celebrate, you're gonna burn out.
Yep.
So
David Plotz says you can tell who's winning by who's having the most fun. And you look at
right,
these Trump rallies, and people see them from the outside and say, oh, they must have a huge amount of electoral popularity because look at the people who are having so much fun, cheering him on, when really they're like 30% of the population. I mean,
right,
he's got
if
a hard
that,
ceiling.
yeah. No,
But
but I
we don't say, "Oh my gosh, we just passed this something that's incredibly popular, like the Violence Against Women Act being, preventing guns from being in the hands of
right.
abusers," and we don't go, "That's a win, and we should celebrate that." And that's way more than 50% of the population wants guns out of the hands of domestic abusers.
Right.
Like,
I
celebrate
think
these things.
fundamentally people want something they can feel good about and believe in. And like it can't just be fear. Now, that said, like if you're gonna pick one thing to make people vote in November, like fear of Trump is a good thing, but also people want hope.
Yeah,
It's the same thing with like you know, you can get into degrowth and all of these things where I think that you don't want to be too technologically utopian, but I do think that like when we show these big problems like climate change or poverty or whatever, we also need to show there are things we can do and are doing that are getting better. Like the racial wealth gap has closed significantly in the last few years. Like, let's celebrate that. You
Right.
know, like green energy is going faster than it ever has. Like, we need to celebrate that stuff so we know where to keep pushing because we can't give up. Like
Yeah.
there's no giving up is not an option, like checking out is not an option. And so I really have very little patience for uh and I'm not super politically involved. You know, it's like I'm not going door to door canvassing, but I feel like you got to at least vote because I think if you're taking yourself out and saying like, well, nobody here perfectly represents my values, so I'm abstaining. Like, that's putting your personal sense of purity over your ability to actually do good in the world. And I get that it's hard, but like, man,
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to pick the lesser evil in order to have less evil in the world.
Well, and not even, yes, I mean, and not even the kind of the less evil, but
Sure.
it is fine for somebody to be slightly different from you. I was talking to a friend of mine who was, I'm unsatisfied with all the other candidates, and I was like,
Yeah.
are you willing to run? Because you could do that. You could run
Right.
for it is not too late. You could announce you're running for president. That is the only way to find somebody who aligns with all of your values.
Right.
Otherwise, anybody else you choose is going to have some differences, and that's not holding your nose. That's you're not willing to do it.
Well,
So you're going to have to pick somebody, maybe pick somebody who's viable and has a giant apparatus
right.
to
Well,
actually enact policy.
Another way to think about it, rather than like choosing the lesser evil, is think about who would you rather fight? Like, if you're fighting for your cause, would you rather fight the person who does not care at all what you think? Or would you rather fight the person who may differ with you on some angles, but fundamentally agrees with you on a lot of things? Who's going to be easier to fight? Who's going to be easier to convince?
Yeah.
Like, choose your enemy.
Yep.
And so you don't have to love the candidate. They don't have to represent you. You're just choosing which battle you want to fight. And when somebody told me that, that really changed my perspective on politics, where it's not giving up to choose somebody you don't agree with. It's in fact like forwarding the cause and carrying that battle standard forward.
It's being strategic. Like, this is a
Exactly.
person I am more likely to be able to persuade. That's the person I'm going to, absolutely. And I think that sense of I'm going to take my ball and go home. There are
Yeah.
circumstances where that is strategic, but we are not in that circumstance right now.
Right, exactly.
Like, this is a time when you've got to go, if I still want to be in the fight in the future, there has to be a fight in the future.
Right,
And
right,
and so I
exactly.
can't just I can't just lose right now. But yeah, this has been a time. This Biden back and forthism. I don't know if you found this too. I'm now to the kind of part of it where I'm going, I don't know that it is productive to engage in this at all. I'm just going to check out for, and which listeners to the show know is very much not me. Like, I'm always like, what's the newest political news? And I'm going with this one, maybe till the convention. There's no real news now.
Right.
Like,
Well,
we're waiting
let me-
on that.
let me tell your listeners, if you are tired of politics and looking to check out, I write queer young adult rom-coms that you
There
should
you go.
absolutely.
That's what I should do is,
Do
hey,
you need some romance starring a teenage ghost hunter who finds a ghost, but then the ghost won't help her unless she takes his little sister to prom? I've got the book for you. It's called The
yeah,
Ghost of Us.
yes, that would be really good for my mental health. I just have
Yeah.
to go read The Ghost of Us, and that will make me
That's-
feel much better.
That's why I started writing these. So I was working in science fiction and fantasy for, most of the 20 years that I've been writing professionally. And then during the pandemic, I was working on a big dystopian space opera thing. And I was just so sick of dystopia. Like, I felt so down that I was reading all this queer young adult romance in order to pep myself back up, and just thought, God, this is fun. Wouldn't it
Yeah.
be fun to try doing something like this? And it turns out it's a blast to write. It's
Oh, yeah.
really delightful.
Yep. My current trilogy is set in our world, in our time, but with, it's paranormal, it's vampires and
Yeah.
werewolves and that kind of stuff. And the next one is going to be epic high fantasy. Like, I know I am going to need to check out for a while.
Right,
And
right.
go into a world that is not ours, where I can play around even with ideas that relate to our world, but I need that distance for the next. And I was talking to a friend of mine who it took her 10 years to write her epic high fantasy.
Oh,
And I think
geez.
that is part of what has me excited too, is I don't need to publish for a while. I can take the time to write the doorstop
Right,
book.
right.
I can still do short fic and that kind of stuff, but maybe write the big epic high fantasy for the next during the second Trump administration.
Yeah.
I just
Oh God. Oh God.
Isn't that a
Let's hope
scary
not.
sentence?
It
Sentence that I hope
sure
will
is.
not come to pass. So I did want to ask you though about other, outside of news, outside of your writing, what other hobbies have been taking up your time?
Well, so I play a lot of music. Traditionally, I don't really gig with bands very often anymore just because I've reached the age where there's a lot of babysitters required to get a band practice together.
Yeah.
But I still play wherever I can. But I recently I decided to take up learning how to play the drums because I've always, I've played guitar and bass and sang, but I've always really admired, especially heavy metal drummers. I used to love in my metalcore band just like lying on the floor in front of the kick drum and letting that double bass just
Double bass. That's the
like letting it just wash over me. And so my roommate found a free drum kit on Craigslist, and we went, you know what? It's time to learn. So I've spent the last 7, 8 months in drum lessons learning how to play the sort of hardcore that I really like. And I can do that double bass drum roll, and it's really fun.
It's really so. Do you have what's the space that you have to practice in?
So actually I've got a unique living situation in that my wife and I bought a house with our best friends. And so the four of us all live in a house in Seattle, which is incidentally, 4 adults, no kids is about what you need in order to afford a
I was going
house
to
in
say real
Seattle.
estate market wise, that's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. But so we've got a garage and we've got this drum kit, which I didn't realize when my roommate ran out and picked it up that it's a junior sized kit. Like it's not full size, but it's like, you know what? We're going to learn on it. So I am playing a lot of extreme metal and hardcore on a kid-sized kit, and
That's
it's a
awesome.
blast.
Oh yeah.
So I find it really good for my mental health because it's very meditative. It's very just like sort of chop wood, carry water. Like I'm just so focused on the task at hand. And I love because I'm not any good at it yet, or like I started out with very little skill in that regard. I could feel every time I sat down, I could feel myself learning. It's one of those things where like I'm not a great guitarist, but I'm good enough at this point where it takes a fair amount of work for me to level up.
Mm.
But with drums, literally I'll play for an extra hour and suddenly it's like, oh, I've unlocked 16th notes. There's just like
Wow.
achievements again and again. And so I really encourage people learn things that you don't know anything about that uh it's also nice because I'm not basing any of my self-worth on it or anything. Like if I sit down to write something, I've got a reputation, I've got an ego, like it's a professional thing. Even musically, like if I'm recording something, I've got some ego tied up in it
Right.
because I want it to sound good. Like I've been doing this for a long time. But drums, like, hey, I know I don't know how to play the drums, so let's just have some fun.
Yeah.
And that's been a delight.
Yeah, so I was talking to, I'm trying to remember, it was on one of the episodes of the show about finding something you have no desire to monetize. It's
Yes,
so freeing.
yes.
Like this is not about, I don't need to turn this into a thing that I make money from. I can just learn. And then, later, who knows? But even holding on to that later, who knows, is kind of dangerous. Like, nope,
Yeah.
this isn't about money. This is just about getting better at a thing.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have hobbies. Like for me, it's, drums and hiking and biking, where like it's fun to get better at them, but nobody cares if I get better at them. They
Right.
don't matter for anything. Which is similar actually to uh, when I used to work. When I worked for Paizo Publishing doing, the Pathfinder and Starfinder role playing games, held a lot of different jobs there, everything from, started out as the intern and like customer service all the way up to like creative director and executive editor of the novel line. um But along the way, a thing that I found was always really helpful was having some creative outlet on the side that was not my main job. Whether that was playing in my metal band or writing a novel or whatever it was, because it meant that I could a little bit put some distance between me and the office because my creative work there wasn't my only creative work.
Right.
And I see people a lot of times make this mistake when they start working, professionally in the arts, where that game or that band or that series or whatever it is really consumes them. And that's extra hard when it's in a corporate setting where you aren't the final say.
Yeah.
And so you can't work with 30 other people on a game and then let that what happens in that game be your whole life and identity, because you're fundamentally not in control of it. So
Yes.
for me, having something else on the side really allowed me to be a better collaborator in that environment because I could pick my battles. I could, stand firm when I needed to and then say, okay, well, the company is going this way. How do I get on board with that?
And how do
Uh,
I still feel satisfied with my life because I'm doing this other thing on the side? Like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that is good for all folks out there to remember. And it doesn't even have to be, you work in the creative field for a corporation. Having a creative outlet outside of your work is really important.
Yes, it
So,
really is.
um, well, okay, so we're going to go to our ad break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately. Special announcement time. NotAPipe Publishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, the show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone: 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60-second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run one or two of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
Bold Rising. Algo and their team of enforcers take on the underbelly of Geneva megacity before being sent on a mission to Mars, a cesspit of corporate exploitation. Suong, a child laborer, must turn the heart of Agent Algo while the fate of Mars, her friends, and her family hang in the balance. Cold Rising. Cold Rush novella, available now on Amazon.
In 1883, the famous German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche put forth the idea of the Übermensch, the Superman. In my latest novel, Project Übermensch, Geoffrey Cannon is either a modern-day messiah or the product of a military experiment gone awry. Either way, the young, inspirational guru has mad powers and metaphysical skills. But Geoffrey's life as spiritual healer and speaker takes a dark turn when some devotees, young women he's had brief affairs with, are inexplicably murdered under grisly circumstances, and rumors of Bigfoot, Sasquatch abound. Amazon is the best place to find my books. That's Lonnie Busch, Busch with a C like the beer. I hope you'll check them out.
No one wants to live in a country ruled by wizards, unless the alternative is worse. Peter Watts, author of Blindside, says, a near-perfect blend of implacable horror, gallows humor, and ecological apocalypse. Nick Namadas, author of The Second Shooter, says, relentlessly radical and often hilarious. Cascade, Book 1 in the Sleep of Reason trilogy, by Rachel A. Rosen. Available now at bookshop.org, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and at bppress.ca.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with James Sutter. And James, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
Well, so, It's interesting. You were talking earlier about working in high school and how like their social mores are evolving. And something I'm really fascinated by is how social mores are evolving. And one of the things that I learned recently from a high school teacher friend that just blew my mind is uh sort of the way modesty is changing. And one of those things is that apparently like middle school and high school kids they don't show their feet. Like they'll be hiding, at least at this school.
Yeah.
Like all the kids are, they'll be wearing their, cut off shorts and crop tops or whatever, but feet, they're all wearing socks. They're wearing socks with sandals.
I
Because
don't think
they
I'd
just
noticed that, but I think that's true. Yeah,
yeah,
I'll be more sensitive to it. Like, oh,
but
you're right. No feet in here.
this friend was saying like, yeah, because they all like have this idea that like feet pictures end up on the internet, OnlyFans or whatever. And so like foot fetishism has somehow made them decide that like the foot is an erogenous zone to be covered. And so to the point where like you'll have all these kids wearing like big old, tube socks with their short shorts.
Yeah.
And then, the teachers will come in wearing like perfectly nice sandals or whatever. And the kids will be like, oh God, the toes, like, Mrs. So-and-so has her dogs out. And I just thought
is
that was
fascinating.
so fascinating. Cause I've been
I'm
wondering.
see, I'm one of these like shoes on, like I've got my big old giant boots on all the time, even in the house. I'm a boots in the house guy.
Yeah.
And and I know, when I go into other people's homes and I have to take my shoes off and I'm going around in my socks, even that is uncomfortable for me. So I've never considered it. But in my classroom, you're right. I mean, we're to the point now where we've gotten away from dress code basically entirely, which is a good
Right.
thing. There is no reason I should ever be commenting on any child's clothes. Like,
Of
that's
course.
just,
Yeah. That's
they're
just
children.
weird.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Wear whatever you want. And so we're to the point where the kids are basically like, yeah, I mean, the crop tops can be basically bras now. Like, who
Well,
cares? It's as long as they're learning and they're not commenting on each other's, who cares?
But
So
that's
now
what
I'll have to watch for the shoes, the feet.
Well, and the reason I'd always been wondering is it seemed like fashion wise, and I'm not just talking about kids, I'm just talking each generation of adults as well. Like since like the Victorian era, it just feels like every generation, the clothing has gotten more revealing. And I felt like we're coming to a point where
Right.
there's no more left to take off.
Right.
So like short of having, whatever 2 generations from now everybody be nude, which I don't think is where we're going, like what is going to change? How is each generation going to be changing in their fashion? And so this idea of like, oh, we're actually going to get a swing back towards a more prudish, I mean, not prudish, but
But
like
it is
towards,
prudish about one area. That's
yeah, we're
really
gonna have a
interesting.
swing back towards modesty, and in ways that we don't necessarily expect.
Yeah.
Like I would never have thought that socks would be the first thing. So I'm just always wondering, being a science fiction and fantasy person, I'm always wondering, like, what is society going to look like in 20 years?
Well, and it's such a good illustration of the way we can't predict, because if we look at trend lines, you'd go, and then they're just going to be nudists. Like,
Right. And then you
the
end up in
kid
some
is gonna
Piers
be in a way
Anthony
you
future
can't
that's all
predict.
sort of, yeah, like,
Yeah, and at the same time, it's not going to be next generation full body stocking
right,
onesie
right.
for everybody. So what is that? That is really fascinating. Now I'm going to be looking, and kids are going to be like, "Why are you looking at our socks?" And I'm going to be like, "Because it's just weird to me that you're all wearing socks." My son is got super into wearing funny socks, and he was a
Nice.
shorts all the time, cross country guy, but with ridiculous socks. And that just became kind of part of his persona. And those didn't exist when we were kids.
No, I mean, they still like,
socks.
I have often thought like, my wife will have 1 million different socks that are all cute and funny, and dude socks just are not that interesting unless you want like dress socks. So yeah, I'm all about it. I am ready for the sock revolution.
Yeah, well, and it was nice because it became a thing. Like we'd be out traveling and we'd be like, there are some very funny socks. And they are available now. We can get those and bring those home for Noah, and add to his collection. So he was the funny sock guy. But it's, I had not thought of the foot pics phenomena. So that's something I'll be keeping an eye out for. So I always like to ask authors, this is a weird line of questioning, but I think it's a good kind of Rorschach for who we are as people, off the page as well. if you were in a D&D universe, I know you know these universes,
Yeah.
what would be your race and class?
All right. Well, I'm gonna go Pathfinder and Starfinder, obviously. I have worked on D&D. I've gotten to do, I actually started out, my first job in the industry was on Dungeon Magazine, the old venerable Dungeons and Dragons magazines. I did that for a while when I was coming up. Um, and then, I've since then, like, I got a couple years ago, I got to help redo Baldur's Gate as a setting, which was pretty fun. So, like, I
Yeah.
definitely still do some D&D stuff, but I'm gonna go Pathfinder and Starfinder. So I guess actually Pathfinder and D&D, I would undoubtedly be a bard. Like, I want to play my lute and talk to people and be charming. Like, that's absolutely what I want to do. And I'd probably go half elf. Like, I
Mm.
think that just seems like the most fun. Like, you get to live a long time. Like, you're cute without being an alien. You just got a lot going on there. Either that, or if I was going to go for a crazy race, which I like the crazy species, I think like a Tengu or Kenku, like the crow people,
Yeah.
that really appeals to me. So there I'd do that. For Starfinder, I'd be an envoy as the class, which is sort of the bard captain, Han Solo-y sort of character, the one who's a fast talking scoundrel type.
Okay.
Like, that's absolutely what I'd want to do. Just it's all about talking a good game and talking your way in and out of trouble. And species wise, I think so the Shirin in Starfinder are my favorite race that I, wrote up the description for. And so they are a race of bug people who used to be part of a hive mind, this big, like, Zerg-like horde. And then they evolved, or through divine revelation, like, broke away into the ability to be individuals. But they're still very communal. They're very pro-social. They, they're independent. They fiercely guard their independence, but also it's just natural to them to want to help each other. They're telepathic. But my favorite little detail about them is that because they used to be part of a hive mind, and now they've only recently gotten the ability to make choices for themselves, they can literally sort of manually trigger that little reward center in their brain that the hive mind used to use to control them. So they can get drunk off of making choices. So, like, they go to the bar, they don't have to drink anything. They can just read the menu, decide what they want to order, and get drunk that way without actually imbibing anything.
And when you say get drunk, do they get impaired so that they
Somewhat, yeah. Like, they get so blissed out and high on it that they have, like, Shirin have these members of their species that they'll refer to as, like, choice junkies, because it's people who just get addicted to pushing that little reward circuit, making trivial choices. And of course, you can also get that satisfaction by going off and having a life, but it's easy to just sort of hit that reward button in a ultimately damaging way. I wasn't thinking of it as a commentary on social media, but now that I think about it, it kind of is. But so I love that species. They're one of my favorite creations from that game. So I would be one of them. And I also like the sort of socialist communal, like, let's all live in a shared house together.
But I think there's that kind of double-sided coin with them of you want to be pro-social, but you want to fiercely guard your own individualism because it gets you high.
Yeah,
on
and
being,
I think you can have both. And actually, yeah, we shouldn't go off on another political rant, but I think that that's something that I really believe strongly, is that, like, you can have individual choice and, like, individual determination. You don't have to be, like, fascist to get everybody to work together. You can value your independence while also choosing to help others and set up systems to help others.
Yeah, I do think there's that kind of false binary of, we either have to be, shoehorn fascist or, extreme communist. Everybody's doing the exact same thing. or the anarcho-libertarian, we have no social structure that's functional in order to make sure everybody's getting to do whatever they want. And it's like, no, we can live together in community and still be individuals. And in fact, living in, the guy who's got the anarchy sign on the bottom of his skateboard gets to ride on roads that are made by a community.
Exactly. We all, I mean, the reason we got this far over the last, thousands and millions of years is because we evolved to work together. Like, we talk to each other, we understand what each other are thinking, and we team up to do great stuff. And like, when we can embrace that, we do great things. And when we get away from that, we really fall on our faces.
Yeah. So I think the challenging question in this is, what is this idea of you as a Shirin or a Tengu or, an envoy? What does it reveal about you that, might not be readily apparent, based on those species?
Well, I mean, I think that the Shirin just kind of makes sense because, like we were talking about, I have that similar view of, like, I do value independence, but I also am really concerned with community. Like, so like, for instance, at one point, like, I've always loved living in shared housing, like ever since college. Like when my wife and I met, like, I think she had like 5 roommates and I had like 7 to 10. And then like when we eventually moved in together, everybody thought, well, if you're getting married or whatever, it'll just be the 2 of you. And we went, no, like, we're gonna, just combine our houses and have, like we live 4 of us in a house right now, and it's by far the fewest people I've lived with since I moved out of my house, because I like community. And like, we actually, a big group of my friends tried to build a co-housing thing where we were going to have like 50 people buy land and build a little like subdivision, and not like a cult compound, but just we wanted to all be able to live near each other. Turns out that's very hard to do. We put a couple years into it and it didn't work, but like, I still, like, right now I have in Seattle probably 40 friends within walking distance. And I love that. Like, I love community and I love building community. I love talking with people about the things that really matter. And I love being the sort of person who, like, I really pride myself on being somebody who isn't afraid to ask the deep and somewhat awkward questions. So like, I've always had the sort of thing where I'll go have a lunch meeting with like a business contact, and within 15 minutes we're deep into the weeds on like their divorce or whatever, because I want to know what people are passionate about, what they're feeling, what they're scared of, what they care about, because I think that's where you really build connection. And ultimately I just love that. I love building connection. And even all the art that I make is just an attempt to connect with a wider number of people.
Yeah. Well, and that is a somewhat natural, maybe awkward transition to, but if folks now are hearing that and they're saying, yes, thank you, that is the kind of author I am wanting to, be in community with. Where can folks, what's been going on? I want to give you an opportunity to tell folks about this new release.
Well, so I think, so The Ghost of Us just came out. And like I said, it's about a ghost hunter, teenage ghost hunter who's a social outcast. She's desperate to escape her suburb outside of Seattle, which is kind of based on where I grew up as well. And she's determined that the only way she's going to do that is becoming a famous ghost hunter. And so she finally finds a ghost, but the ghost, has his own priorities, and his little sister has been depressed for the last year since he died. So he makes her a deal and says, all right, I'll give you all of the information you need, all of the evidence you want that ghosts are real to make you famous. But first, you need to get my little sister out of her shell and take her to prom. And so it's this whole fake dating thing where he's, the supernatural dating coach, whispering in her ear.
Yes. What's the story?
Cyrano de Bergerac.
Yeah, Cyrano de Bergerac.
That's exactly what it is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And so, yeah. And, of course, the main character, the ghost hunter, ends up falling for the sister. Right. But then the big twist is that as, the plan works and everything rolls forward, The only thing holding the ghost on this material plane is his unfinished business, which is his sister's happiness. So as she gets happier, he starts to disappear. And so the ghost hunter has to decide, does she, you know, try to trap him here by ruining the whole fake dating scheme, or does she keep dating her girlfriend under false pretenses and risk losing the ghost forever? So
Yeah.
she's really caught in a catch-22. And that's the book. It's called The Ghost of Us. It's available everywhere, domestically, internationally, audiobook, ebook, whatever you want. So please check it out.
I've got to check that out, and I've got to get that for my classroom. I mean, that
Yes,
will be a good one for my
yes,
students
please.
too.
Well, and I would be happy to chat with your kids sometimes.
Oh, that
I
would be
love
wonderful.
doing virtual classroom
Yeah.
visits.
Yep, I've done a few of them for my YA, and it's really, really cool. When
It's so
and
fun.
students ask great, challenging questions. My YA, dystopia is essentially what if Walmart took over all the schools and then took over the world. And I
Yeah.
had this kid in somewhere in like central Michigan. I was doing this this great, the teacher was wonderful and reached out to me, and I was doing this talk, and this kid was like, "Why do you hate Walmart so much? I bet you never go to Walmart." And I was like, "No, I go to Walmart, and as I walk in, I quote Shakespeare, 'My poverty, but not my will consents.'"
Right.
We still go to Walmart. We hate what we do when we have to go to Walmart to find an individual thing. And the kids loved that. They were like, "Yes, okay, now you're more human to me, not just somebody railing against Walmart."
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Kids,
But yeah, so
again,
if
the kids are
anybody,
all right. The kids are pretty great. So yeah, I would love to get you in touch with my students, because they ask such interesting questions too, when they really, it'll be some like minutia about a character, and you're like, "I don't know that I ever thought about it, but now that you ask,"
yeah, no, kids are smart, man. But anyway, so if anybody's interested in that or my rockstar romance, Darkhearts, you can learn more about that or my game work or comics or whatever at my website, jameslsutter.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at James_L_Sutter, or Twitter for as long as that lasts. I'm just at James L. Sutter over there, and I'm always happy to chat with folks.
And I will put all those links in the show notes. So folks who are on their podcasting app right now can scroll down to the bottom. Those are all there. Follow James there. That would be really
Awesome.
good. So before we get to your TBR pile, I've got to recommend a book to you that I think you're just going to love.
Yeah,
So
please.
add this to yours. Karen Eisenbray's The Gospel According to Saint Rage. And
Oh, I don't know
is-
that one.
So she is a fellow Seattle author. And
Okay.
the novel is there's two now. The Gospel According to Saint Rage and Barbara and the Rage Brigade is the sequel. And I know
Okay.
she's working on the third. But the first one is about a young woman who is so invisible in her school that we as readers don't know if she is literally invisible. She may
Oh,
be
wow.
invisible. And then a popular kid gives her she runs into him at a thrift store, and he says, "You should start wearing this hat. People will notice you more."
Yeah.
She starts wearing this hat and maybe gets magic powers from the hat. And her superpowers are the best things like if she does finger guns. If she flips somebody off, a bird shits on them. Like, it's those kinds of magic powers. And no, it is finger guns. I think it's finger guns. And so
Nice.
then she decides, I've got superpowers, and instead of the impulse being, I should, immediately, put on tights and save the city of Seattle.
Yeah.
Her impulse is, this is my opportunity to start an all-girl garage band. And so she starts, she goes from being the kid who knows music and plays at the bell choir at church to, well, now people are noticing me. I should start a rock band. And they start this rock band, and she comes up with the name for the band, seeing one of those like storage signs, but the O has been smashed out. So it just says Saint Rage, and names the band Saint Rage. And so it's The Gospel According to Saint Rage, and it is absolutely delightful. And all the other characters in the band then get their own kind of stories in their own chapters, and they've all got very different things going on in their lives, and it's just a wonderfully written story. Yeah, I think you would really, really enjoy that one. So check out Karen Eisenbray's The Gospel According to Saint Rage.
That's right up my alley.
And I'm so glad that she's working on the third now. Karen, if you're hearing this, finish the third. We will love that trilogy. So how about you? What's on your TBR pile?
Well, so one that I can't wait to start that I'm probably going to start today, is Colton Gentry's Third Act by Jeff Zentner, which is his first adult novel. I've loved all of his young adult stuff. He's one of my favorites. And this one is about a country music star who gets disgraced by speaking out in favor of gun control and has to like head back to his hometown. And just everything Jeff writes just draws me immediately in. So I'm super excited for that one. And then of course, James S.A. Corey has the authors who collectively did the Expanse series have a new one coming out here in the next month or two. And so that one I'm waiting for.
I heard an interview with them. I didn't realize it was two guys who are one guy until I heard this interview with them. And they literally wrote down this game that they were making in order to be able to, their thinking was, maybe if we put this out in the world, we'll make enough money for pizza for our game nights.
Right.
And it became the
Expanse. Yeah.
And it's
they're very
so great.
good.
So they've got a new one coming out?
Yeah, they've got a new one coming out. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I'm sure anybody Googling will find it.
Is it in the Expanse series or is it new?
No, it's a new series. The Expanse is done.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see what they do.
Yeah.
And one of them, so it's James S. Corey is Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. And Daniel actually told me a really interesting thing at a convention one time, talking about a career in the arts and how so much of it is luck and just how things work out. And he talked about sort of reinventing himself several times as an author. And I think what he said was, he was like, I was a failure as a horror author, a middling success as a fantasy author, and a wild success as a science fiction writer with The Expanse. But his point was, it was me the whole time.
Right.
Like all of those authors, you can say they're either terrible, fine, or amazing, but it's all just him.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really great illustration of the fact that like all you can do is put your best work out there. It's not necessarily a reflection on how good the work is, like how successful it is. Sometimes it's just right place, right time, or maybe you are a little bit better at one thing rather than another. Like I would venture to say that I spent 15 years focused exclusively on science fiction and fantasy for adults. And like, I don't know, now that I'm writing queer young adult romance, I feel like I'm better at this. Like it's fun. It's funny. Like I enjoy it more. So you never know.
Yeah, but also the skill sets inform one another. And so it very well could be that, that he became a really talented science fiction author because he put in his time writing horror and writing fantasy. And that you are writing, I can totally imagine, as somebody who's written YA and written for adults, that all that time you put in writing for adults means you were learning, story structure, elements of story and character. And I don't think you would have written YA as well before.
No, totally. It's everything builds off itself. And I still write for adults. Like it's funny, in the last couple of years, what I've published has been primarily, I've published primarily three things in the last couple of years: queer young adult romance, adult, sort of bizarro horror stories, which I've gotten, it's some of the biggest short story markets of my whole career have been in the last couple of years with horror, which I hadn't really done before. And then comic books, doing like the Starfinder comic books, which is also a totally different medium, different genre.
So talk about a skill set. I tried to write a comic book one time. I got rejected by Marvel, but the work I put into that book, I mean, it's describing frame by frame. It's a picture's worth 1,000 words. Like it's a lot of describing.
They're all different, but they all build on each other.
Yeah. Well, and once you get into it and you've got a relationship with that artist and, you're actually
sure.
But the first one, that spec one, that's a challenge to write. That was really good for me as a writer. I learned a lot. I got a this was like when I was in, I think, high school, and I got a very gracious, response from Joe Quesada, and I've got it, like
Oh, that's
saved in a
awesome.
file somewhere. He was really, really cool about it, because this was totally like, I don't, it was a new series. Like,
Yeah.
I wrote an X Babies. I don't know if you remember in X-Men,
Wow. Yeah.
couple episodes where Mojo made an X Babies group, and I was like, what if the X Babies had their own series? And I wrote an X Babies comic, and
That's amazing.
and he was really cool about it. It just didn't fit into where they wanted to go with things, but I mean, that's what he said.
Well,
I was
and-
also, like 18 or something.
Yeah, but writers need to remember that like rejection is a constant in this industry. You never stop getting rejected. And if you do stop getting rejected, you're probably not aiming high enough. So like I still, I hang out with New York Times bestsellers who still get rejected sometimes, right? Like it's always going to be a thing. So you have to learn to be not just okay with it, but at some level embrace it. Because if even the greats are getting rejected all the time, then when you get rejected, you're having the same experience as those famous authors you admire. Like you are doing the same job. Like when you are sitting at your computer, when you're submitting stuff, when you are getting the rejection and feeling bad about it, like you're doing it. You are a professional. It is happening. So try to take what joy and pride you can in that.
Yeah, a friend of mine taught me the habit of, when a friend of ours, this was in the poetry scene, and so you're sending poems off all the time, and you're just,
Sure.
rejection is almost constant, like it's every other day, and she was saying the habit she had developed is, and taught to others, is that when you get rejected, when you find out that a friend has been rejected, you say congratulations.
Right,
And the
exactly.
congratulations is good for you, you tried, you got it out there, congratulations on sending it.
Yeah.
And that rejection is just part of the courage to send it out in the first place. And so I've tried to take that on. Congratulations to you for sending it out in the first place. That's that's the hardest part.
You did the thing.
Yeah. So let's see. I wanted to ask you also, who would be somebody that you would recommend I have on this show?
Oh, let's see. I would suggest Courtney Gould. So, I talked about The Ghost of Us is a, sapphic supernatural romance young adult. Courtney also does sapphic supernatural young adult romance, but with a very different take. Like hers are much more thrillers. Like they're dark and sort of creepy. I really liked her first book, The Dead in the Dark, is also about a teenage ghost hunter. And so naturally I read it and I loved it. But it's such a wildly different vibe. It's funny. And she's just a delight. We did a book event together at one point, and I was glad to see that. It's always nice when you admire somebody's writing and then they turn out to be really cool in person, or vice versa. That's just one of the great joys of working in this industry. So I'd recommend her.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. I will absolutely reach out. So I've got to thank some folks before we wrap up. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know that you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to the band Halisna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and you'd like your song to be used on a show, I would love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. And I cannot forget to mention, Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it. Please check out James's The Ghost of Us. Tell a friend about it. Give it that review. That 5th star makes a big difference. So
It really does.
click on that 5th star. Make James' day. And same with this show, please, click on that little thumbs up there. Tell a friend about this show. It really does make a big difference. I've got some weird, there's some obsessive person out there who hates me, who comes to this show and downvotes it on YouTube from 2 different accounts every single week. And it's very weird. And I'm like, this person, their antipathy toward me, I don't know where it comes from, but it's very odd. So people out there, please click that thumbs up to compensate for Weirdo McWeirdo Pants, who is just doing this on this regular basis. It's very strange. I've never been obsessed enough with anything to come back every week to go, I just want to remind you I don't like you. Like, okay, then go away.
I can't even remember to come back every week for the people I love.
Exactly. I don't have that kind of investment in anything. So yes, please, folks, click that thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. So, James, what is your advice for folks as they go into their week? What would you like to leave folks with for the week?
I'm gonna say, remember that no matter how many books you write and publish, you are gonna die. So prioritize accordingly. Like the goal is not to publish, the goal is to have a good life, and publishing should be in service of that. And if it's not, something needs to change.
And I love this and struggle with it. So my current series of books is all about wrestling with our own mortality, which sounds really grim. And it's like, how do I make this into a fun series? So it's going to be a fun chase story, and it's going to be, like, but it's all about, hey, how do we acknowledge the fact that we're going to die? And the kind of premise is that cishet white guys like me have the hardest time with this because our whole life experience has taught us like that we can defeat anything. And every other character in this is like, yeah, sometimes you fight struggles and you lose because I'm a person of color. I'm, you don't always win, and the cishet white guys are like, what? I get to do anything. And so but I personally absolutely agree with you and struggle so hard to feel that. I think so much about legacy, and this book is going to be read by people after and that won't matter to me.
Yeah, and see,
I will literally be gone. Who cares?
I'm the opposite. I don't think about legacy at all for that reason. Like if all my books evaporate the moment I die, like that's fine, because the point was to write them and to live a cool life where I got to be an author.
Yeah.
And this was a thing that I actually realized years ago when my second book came out, and I think The Redemption Engine in 2014, because I think that a lot of the writing advice you get is to just grind.
Yeah.
All the writing advice is like, you got to put your butt in the chair. You got to close the door, shut your family outside, do whatever you got to do. Give up nights, weekends, birthdays, whatever.
Yeah.
And to some extent that is true. That will let you to get the words. And if you're having trouble getting yourself to write, you do sometimes need to just force yourself to sit down. But I definitely had that mentality. And after I wrote my second book, I realized this is that's true, but this is my life. And writing a book doesn't change it. Writing 10 books doesn't change it. And so I need to stop feeling guilty all the time I'm not writing books. The point of writing books is to have a fun life. And writing books and publishing them is fun.
Yeah.
And so once I gave myself permission to wholeheartedly embrace the things that are not writing books, I found that ironically I still got almost as much writing done. I just felt better the rest of the time because I wasn't constantly feeling guilty about not writing. So I think beware the people who preach this sort of ascetic monastic grinding, because ultimately life maybe it'll fuel your writing and make it better, but it'll definitely make your life better. People matter. Having taken time for yourself matters. So don't go so hard that you forget why you're doing it. And why you're doing it is to enjoy yourself.
Yeah, I there is an inconsistent correlation between the joy you feel while you are writing and the joy the reader will feel. Sometimes you do have to grind, but if you are miserable the whole writing process, the reader's probably going to be miserable the whole reading. And so how do you, find the parts that I have most enjoyed writing are the parts that readers will then later say to me, I really enjoyed that scene. Yeah, because it was fun as fuck to write too.
Well, and publishing is such a crapshoot that I think I remember years ago, science fiction writer Tobias Buckell had said, if you're going to write something, write what you want to write, because then even if it fails, you had fun doing it. Whereas if you write something that you don't have fun doing and it succeeds, you still have only won 50% of the way because you didn't enjoy doing that thing. And maybe now you have to do more of it.
Well, that's another thing. So, and this, for you as a musician too, you'll appreciate this. If I feel badly for those musicians who write, create music very much for the market and then get a hit and are forced to keep playing that goddamn song that they hate for the rest
The
of their
next 40
careers.
years. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cherry Pie or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Write the music you want to play every night for the next 50 years of your life.
And the thing is, even if you try to do the thing that you think is going to work, it probably won't work because most things in publishing don't work. You can write the best book around and it still has a large possibility of only a few people reading it.
Well, and especially in publishing, because it takes so long, so that if you try and chase the trend, by the time your book is done, the trend is gone. Don't chase the trend, write the book you enjoy.
So just write the thing that you want to do. And like, honestly, it has as much a chance of succeeding as the highly strategic thing. So just enjoy yourself. Just have fun.
Absolutely. Well, I can't add anything to that because that is the best advice you're going to get this week. So folks out there, have a wonderful week. And remember, no matter how much you procrastinate, James and I are still proud of you.
Thanks so much for having me on.
If I take my time.